Hey y'all, bit behind on uploads, but in case you didn't hear, some stuff happened this weekend in the game. But this is our war against HCAR, and I am once again using Carl. This is Hulkling. Obviously, Carl doesn't actually counter this node. He doesn't have unique buffs. He's not really doing anything to stop or control Hulkling's buffs. Basically, the reason to use Carl here is that he messes with Hulkling's indestructible and does a bunch of damage. And we're just going to do our absolute best to not block any hits because although our physical resistance will help quite a bit, it mitigates Pierce and those Furies, we just don't want to find out just how much it's going to help. Which also probably means that we're not going to bother with heavies. It is possible to heavy counter Hulkling's special too, and then use that to heavy cancel into a special, and that would definitely end this. But I would rather just play it safe and do that and finish with no damage taken. So moving on to Weapon X, I believe I've taken this before. I've definitely taken 22 with Carl before, I think. But the basic rub here is that if you fight Weapon X, you kind of want to bleed immune, because if he tags you a couple times, it's easy for almost anyone to bleed out. But this is Hazard Shift Incinerate Poison, and Carl has to choose between bleed immunity and incinerate immunity. So we have a invulnerability boost on, and we want to be very careful about him being aggressive. Now, the thing is, once he goes into his mode, he will be plenty aggressive, and then we'll be fine. But as you're going to watch here, if I remember correctly, yep, he really does not want to throw this. And I'm therefore not hitting him and not getting pauses, and so I was starting to worry about losing my form, because I knew I would have the duration of that unstoppable to wait it out. And I really, really did not want to get caught without my immunities on this node, and so I put him into it manually. Reminder, when he gets to 25, he automatically triggers Berserk, but the hit that sends him over, he is not unstoppable for that hit, and so you can get around it if you're careful and know what you're doing. And once that happens, power efficiency helps us. You can see his charges just going through the roof because we're basically just doing a combo at a time and punishing his specials. So, kind of a scary start, but then it gets really easy from there. Moving on to Apocalypse, this is a solid placement against Carl for the same basic reason. We need to use Black Uru here, and that means that if we end up blocking a ton of Apocalypse's specials, we won't have any defense against the energy damage in the beams. Now, that said, there's not really a whole lot else to worry about because, besides that, I forgot that I messed up that first heavy counter. See, there we go. Same basic idea as Tigray. You want to wait for him to start leaning forward, and that's when you counter it. Works quite well. But I am going to be pushing him to the special 2 here, and I am going to be dexing it. I know not everybody thinks that that's completely wise in war, but I am just very comfortable with it, and I prefer it to dealing with the special 1. It's also going to allow me to control Flourish better because I know I'm just not going to be able, or I'm not going to need to block it. And yeah, basically the idea here is continue to push him heavy counter where we can. See, there we waited for him to come forward enough, and our special landed. When we heavy, we can. But notice that we didn't have quite enough power to heavy cancel there, and so I am going to throw this. I probably could have heavied there, but I didn't want to risk it. It's important to keep your immunities. Oh, the other reason is that I wanted to push him to the special too. Yeah. And I stand by that decision. I think it's very tempting with Carl to go for his absolute maximum output a lot of the time. And to, get your heavy cancels, your light interrupt so that you have maximum morph charges, and just really stay on top of that all the time. But at the end of the day, most of the fights you're using him for in war do rely on his immunities, and so the single most important thing is just safe form upkeep. If you should be using him in the fight, odds are, as long as you do that, it's going to be safe at the end of the day. And it was. And then we go ahead and we move on to this Knull here. And we're, of course, going to do this with Carl. If he throws a special one, then we can deal with corruption. We have good counters to the unblockable and unstoppable. I know how to deal with the reverse controls. But the basic idea here is to push him to the special 2. We don't have the tactic helping us out because Knull is not a tactic defender, so we do have to be careful about managing our forms. But other than that, this is very simple. And we can actually parry heavy here. You don't have to parry heavy against Knull. You can bait out his heavy and then counter it. But sometimes the 45% Carl gets on a parry heavy just is enough for the damage, and you don't need to do anything fancy. And that was well illustrated there. Now, I'm pausing right here because this next fight was not originally assigned to me. We had somebody else with Odin pre-fights, and that's because I really did not want to mess with Punisher gaining a bunch of power without Odin pre-fights to let me win Rich Get Richer. The person who's supposed to bring Odin does live in England. I'm not blaming them for this, but they had some personal troubles and basically needed to go to bed. They were exhausted. I'm not holding it against them. But it would have held us up quite a bit for me to wait on them, for us to wait on them, and so I decided to take this. And I should have thrown that first special one immediately, honestly. Yeah. I should have thrown this special too. That's what I wanted. Because now we're getting in trouble. I told myself going into... Right there, if I had thrown that, then he doesn't go red right here. But I told myself coming into this fight that I just needed to not be scared to throw specials. As long as I wasn't scared to throw specials, I didn't need to try and line up the special 3. I just needed to stay on top of him. And it's not like I really had the option of invulnerability boosting. I suppose I could have technically, because I could have dexed immediately and gained power. Honestly, that would have been smarter. But yeah, if I had just thrown that special 2 when I said I should have, instead of waiting and pushing him red, I think I definitely would have gotten that down. Because you'll see that this cleanup just goes much, much better. See, we throw this right away. My fault. We stay on top of the decks. I'm looking for an opportunity to hit his block so that we can win Rich Get Richer. You'll notice our power going up here. And that's really why the Odin pre-fights are so important, because we actually can win that fight all the time instead of having to frantically try and stay on top of it. Whatever. Chalking this one up to a coordination death. They happen sometimes. You can see just how bad Rich Get Richer is right there as he starts climbing when we don't have a buff. But yeah, like I said, this stuff just happens sometimes. This is me losing my Deathless season. I had not died at all before this. And if I had stuck to somebody else taking this... Funny thing is, even if they had died, I would have kept my Deathless season. So, it is what it is. This stuff happens. This is why, while I would love to be Deathless again, I don't put that much stock in it, because sometimes to keep the battle group moving, you have to take risks. And sometimes when you take risks, this happens. So please don't tell me all of the other counters I could have used for this. I know, we assigned them. This is what we had. But turns out this was actually a good war to lose the streak on, because our opponents did not die at all. Pretty tough to beat that. Anyway, now we're moving on to this Gorr, which is the entire reason I had Diablo instead of Odin anyway. Because Absorbing Man with Odin's definitely could have taken that Punisher. But I had to have a way to take Gorr down. And we had another Diablo in the field, but they were needed elsewhere. Yeah, again, it is what it is, because this fight is super simple and makes me feel completely justified in bringing Diablo. If we had had the Odins, then this would have been a great war, and I would have felt amazing about these assignments, but stuff happens. Focusing on this fight, Diablo really is amazing for this. I've done this before. Reminder, this Diablo is only a rank 3. It would be amazing to be able to pause these poisons. I'm not going to be able to get back to a special 1 in time to do that. But it doesn't matter. They do so much damage, and then we have enough buff control that we can close this out. I am going to throw special 1s here, but I'm not throwing special 1s for the sake of the special 1. I'm throwing the special 1 because of how many buffs Gorr has, so that I can throw the special 2. Because reminder, the burst damage on Diablo's special 2 is based on how many buffs and poisons the opponent has procced during the fight. And so after that big special 3, and against somebody like Gorr, this just does an absolute ton. So this time we're going to wait for him to get the buffs, because yes, he will regen from that, but it's also going to mean that we can throw 2 special 2s back to back, and that is going to finish this off. So full health at the end. That's why we brought Diablo. He's a really, really good counter to that. Moving on to this Killmonger. I have taken Killmonger on hazard shifts in Magma before. I've taken Killmonger in general with Uru before. If you have to be in Magma for immunities, then it is nice if you can bring Thor for the armor break synergy, but it's not necessary. Not as long as you know how to play Killmonger, and you just focus on trying to control his power and have him enter reverb at very low power. So that is why we're not going to punish this special right here. We're going to wait for him to hit in, throw a heavy, and now we're taking reverb back and not mitigating it at all. But the percentage back that we're taking because of reverb is very low, because remember, it's proportional to where his power was when reverb started. Additionally, we're not hitting that hard on our actual hits. Most of Karl's damage is red numbers, and that just makes him very safe for Killmonger. Get a few crits in here on top of the incinerates, and we're doing great. Refine right there, get the vulnerabilities up. I could have punished that, but I wasn't super sure. Waited for the second medium, and there we go. Again, trigger reverb at fairly low power. Not as perfect as the first one, but the fight's gone well enough, it doesn't matter. I'm not using Karl again, and that's my war. So, you heard me say what's done is done. I'm obviously not happy about the death. Hopefully that's my only one this season, but as I've said a few times, it happens. Hopefully this kind of thing happens less when Set and Forget comes out and we have more time for offense, so I don't feel like the entire battle group is at risk of rushing and causing other deaths elsewhere. If we do have a hang-up like this, we can just wait for the ideal counter. Even, not more than the planning constraints, but along with the reduction of planning constraints, that's really going to be one of my favorite things about the change, is just less coordination stress like this. Would love to never have another death like this in the future. But, as we said, couldn't have happened in a better war, because there was no way we were winning this one. We've had some very good wars this season and recently. I don't think, we haven't had an alliance-wide donut, and therefore, we wouldn't have won this. So, congrats to HCAR, their best war all season. Has to be against somebody, right? Good news is we're still on track for Masters, and I'll see you in the next one to see if we can clinch it up. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and take care.